Welcome to Shatter.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. She didn't even pretend it was about growth. She stood in our living room, suitcase half-zipped, hair still damp from the shower, and said it as if we were casually rescheduling dinner plans. I'm not saying goodbye. I just want to see what else is out there. If nothing better works, maybe I'll come back. That was it. No tears. No apology. Just a half smile and the illusion that she was being honest. I didn't beg. I didn't block the door. I just stood there and watched her walk out with the same confidence people carry when they think safety is guaranteed. Because that's what I had become to her, safe. Not exciting. Not dangerous. Just a man who would always be there, no matter how many times she wandered. She kissed me on the cheek like I was a sibling, not a lover, and pulled the door shut behind her. No slam. No drama. But that sound, it stayed. A whisper of finality in a place she swore she'd return to if nothing better worked. And in that moment, everything inside me went still. She didn't leave because she was lost. She left because she was shopping, measuring, calculating, treating love like a lease she could renegotiate if something with better terms came along. And what she didn't realize was, I heard everything she didn't say, the words behind the smile, the exit plan behind the promise. She thought I'd wait. That I'd keep the same space, same warmth, same open door, just in case. But silence has a way of growing into something solid. Something cold. The kind of silence that doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't ask why. I didn't change the locks. I didn't throw away her things. I didn't post anything. I just started subtracting. My energy, my attention, my availability. Not to prove a point, but because something fundamental inside me had shifted. She thought she was leaving options open. What she didn't understand was this. I was the option, and the moment she turned her back to search for more, she made herself one of mine. The thing no one tells you about someone leaving is that it doesn't happen all at once. First it's the silence, then the absence, then the echo. You start hearing their voice in places they no longer live. Their laugh in a room that hasn't held them in weeks. The memory of footsteps that never reached the door. But I didn't fight the echo. I let it speak. Because inside that stillness, something was becoming clearer than it had ever been. She thought I was a phase in her life, a safe haven she could circle back to if the world outside didn't applaud loud enough. I wasn't the escape. I was the anchor, the fallback plan, and I started to understand the weight of that role. She didn't leave angry. She left hopeful. Hopeful that someone out there would see her as more, want her harder, give her what she thought I wasn't offering. Excitement, urgency, fire. But fire without foundation burns everything around it. And excitement without depth collapses fast. She didn't know what kind of man she was walking away from. Because I never needed to perform. I never tried to sell her a version of me. I was consistent, not because I lacked options, but because I had already made a choice. Her mistake was thinking that consistency equals scarcity. And the echo started talking to her too. I know because she sent a message 3 weeks later. Just 4 words. Do you ever miss me? I didn't reply, not because I didn't feel something, but because she hadn't asked if I was okay. She asked if she was still relevant. That's the difference. You don't reach out to reconnect when the person you left is still healing. You reach out when you start to realize your new life feels thinner than expected. She was looking backward while trying to walk forward, and I was no longer standing where she left me. Every day, I got a little stronger, not in spite of her absence, but because of it. Her silence used to confuse me. Now it taught me everything. I started waking up with peace again. Small routines. Gym before sunrise. Coffee alone, not lonely. Quiet music. New numbers in my phone. Conversations that didn't require translation or tension. And every step forward made her echo smaller. She thought she left options behind. What she left was a man who outgrew the idea of being chosen second. Some people don't look in mirrors unless someone's watching. She was one of them. Her identity was built on reflection, likes, comments, glances across rooms. She needed confirmation to feel alive. And when she walked away, I think she believed she'd step into something shinier. Something with a faster pulse, a louder crowd, a wider audience. But the shine fades. And what's left behind is the mirror. And that mirror doesn't care about attention. It reflects who you are when no one's clapping. I heard through a mutual friend that things weren't going how she'd hoped. The guy she left me for wasn't posting her. The friends she went out with weren't calling her back. The job she thought would open new doors didn't. She started showing up in places I used to take her. Restaurants we discovered together. Same seats. Same drinks. Only this time alone. Not because she missed me. Because she missed what being with me made her feel about herself. There's a difference. See, people don't always mourn the person. They mourn the version of themselves they were when they stood beside them. And the version of her that existed in my world was loved, protected, understood. When that was gone, she tried to recreate it. Same clothes, same playlist, same perfume, as if repeating the past would bring it forward. Meanwhile, I had stopped looking backward. I wasn't chasing new women. I wasn't posting motivational quotes. I wasn't throwing my pain online hoping someone would validate it. I was rebuilding, quietly. My mind got sharper. My circle got smaller. My sense of self got clearer. And she started to feel that from miles away. That's the part no one tells you about pulling away. People feel it even when you don't announce it. They sense the absence of your need. And that absence becomes a mirror they can't avoid. She sent another message a few days later. I think about you more than I expected. Still no accountability. Still centered on her. She didn't want to apologize. She wanted access. But I wasn't that man anymore. Not because I stopped loving her, but because I started loving myself more than the version of me who waited around to be someone's backup plan. She came back quietly. No announcement. No apology. Just a text late at night that said, "I'm in your neighborhood." I didn't answer. I let the message sit in unread limbo, not to play games, but because I no longer moved according to her urgency. Her timelines didn't control me anymore. She came anyway. I heard the knock just after 10 p.m. Same rhythm I used to recognize instantly. I didn't rush to the door. I finished what I was doing, folding clothes, I think. Something simple. Something peaceful. Then I opened it. She stood there like someone expecting a reaction, any kind. Surprise, relief, anger. But I gave her none of it. She looked older, though not in years. Just worn. Like the shine had peeled off and left behind something that didn't quite know who it was without attention. She said she was just passing through. But her eyes told the truth. She hadn't come to visit the neighborhood. She came to see if the door would open. I didn't invite her in. She asked if we could talk. I stepped outside, pulled the door shut behind me, and leaned on the railing. Cold air. Quiet night. The space between us wide enough to carry everything unspoken. She started talking, fast at first, filling the silence with nervous energy, saying how she'd been thinking, how things hadn't gone how she expected, how she never stopped caring. Then she said something that told me everything I needed to know. "I thought you'd wait." That was it. Not a question. A statement. As if I was frozen in time, paused for her return. As if I hadn't evolved in her absence. She didn't understand that the man standing in front of her now wasn't the man she left behind. That man would have welcomed her. Would have let her in just to feel wanted again. Would have turned pain into permission. But this version? He was still calm, unavailable. I told her I had nothing to say, not out of resentment, but because nothing she could explain would change what had already been revealed. She tried again, asked if we could start over. And I saw it in her eyes. She thought effort erased impact. But it doesn't. Some choices echo. Some exits leave a mark. And some doors don't reopen just because the one who left realizes the world outside wasn't warmer. She left for better. And now she was standing in front of something she never thought would lock her out. Silence. Real. Final. Peaceful. She didn't cry. Not that night. She stood on my porch like she still had options. Like all it would take was one honest moment, and everything would slide back into place. But that's the thing about leaving. It changes the shape of what you left behind. You can't walk back into the same room once you've burned the blueprint. And she was realizing that in real time. I told her I was heading out. It wasn't a lie. I had made plans before her message came. I wasn't going to cancel them. Not for someone who once treated me like a placeholder. She looked confused. Hurt. Like the version of me who used to chase her was missing from the scene. Because he was. I locked the door behind me and walked past her. She asked if we could talk later. I said, if I'm free. Not to be cruel, but because my time was no longer her default. That moment marked the shift. Not a scream. Not a slammed door. Just a change in weight. Power. Presence. The next few days were quiet. No texts. No missed calls. I think she thought space would give her leverage again. But I didn't move toward her. I moved deeper into myself. I read more. Ran longer. Said no more often. My peace was no longer conditional. And I started seeing things clearly. Not just her, but me. Who I had been when she left. A man still trying to prove his worth to someone who saw him as an option. That version of me would have broken just to keep her comfortable. This one, he didn't shrink for anyone. And people noticed. Friends I hadn't heard from in months started reaching out. Opportunities started landing. New energy moved into my life. Not because I chased it, but because I stopped making room for what drained me. Meanwhile, she lingered. Not close, but visible. She started showing up in familiar spaces. Liked a photo she had once ignored. Replied to an old story with a vague, "This reminded me of you." That's how they return. Not with accountability, but nostalgia. Because nostalgia doesn't require change. Just memory. But I wasn't interested in memory. I was living in momentum. She had become something I no longer recognized. And I had become something she couldn't predict. That's what shook her most. Not that I was gone, but that I wasn't looking back. She always thought I was the one afraid to lose her. That was her mistake. Because what I feared wasn't losing her. It was losing myself in the process of keeping her. And now that I had let go, I could see the truth without distortion. She wasn't returning out of love. She was returning out of lack. Lack of attention. Lack of options. Lack of control. And that's when I knew she hadn't changed. She was just circling back to familiarity after the world outside didn't clap as loud as she thought it would. There's a specific look people have when they realize the door they slammed behind them is no longer unlocked. Not angry. Not sorry. Just stunned. She started trying harder, subtly at first. Messages became more frequent. Then came a gift. A book I once said I loved. She left it at my doorstep with a note. Thought of you. Still no ownership. No apology. Just reminders. Reminders that she existed. That she once mattered. That maybe, just maybe, there was still space for her in a life she abandoned. But I had no interest in history dressed as hope. Because clarity changes what you respond to. I didn't hate her. There was no resentment left to feed. But I saw her now, not as the woman I missed, but as the choice I survived. She was the lesson, not the future. And that's what hit her hardest. When she reached out again, this time asking if we could meet, I answered simply. For what? She didn't reply. Because there was no reason. No forward path. No open door. Just the echo of a decision that couldn't be reversed. I think that's when it truly landed for her. Not because I said something cruel, but because I said so little. That's what real detachment sounds like. Calm. Measured. Done. She once thought she was the sun, and I was just orbiting her gravity. But the moment I stepped out of her atmosphere, she stopped shining the same. And now she stood alone. Not because I punished her, but because I finally understood that love without respect isn't loyalty, it's self-abandonment. And I wasn't in the business of abandoning myself anymore. Distance doesn't always begin with miles. Sometimes, it starts with a decision. I didn't block her. Didn't delete her number. I didn't need to. I just stopped being accessible. That's the part people rarely talk about. The moment you go from emotionally available to emotionally absent. Not out of cruelty, but clarity. She kept trying to pull the past forward. Texts got longer. Softer. Things like, I still care about you. I just needed space. Maybe we moved too fast. All of it aimed at one thing. Reconnection without accountability. But I had grown past the version of myself that needed closure through conversation. My closure came in watching who she became when she thought I'd always be there. Now, I was watching her from a distance, not out of interest, but out of quiet understanding. And she wasn't doing well. Not falling apart in a dramatic, visible way. Just losing ground. Slowly, the people she once relied on were fading out. The attention she used to receive now felt forced. Her social media presence shifted from curated confidence to veiled attempts at being seen. And beneath it all, she looked tired. Because living without depth eventually wears you down. She had built her identity on being the one who walked away. The one who always had the power to return. Now, that door was closed. Not with anger, not with noise, but with silence. And she was realizing it too late. A friend of hers, someone I hadn't spoken to in months, reached out casually. Said she wasn't herself lately. That she talked about me more than she admitted. That she still believed we had something. I didn't correct him. I just nodded and let the silence speak for itself. Because some stories don't need sequels. They just need to end where they make the most sense. She left because she wanted options. Now she was learning the cost of turning people into placeholders. You don't get to leave a good thing behind. Chase chaos. and expect stability to still be waiting with open arms. That's not growth. That's entitlement. And entitlement has no place in a life that's finally at peace. I didn't respond to her last message. Not because I was angry, but because I finally realized. You don't owe a goodbye to someone who never truly said hello to who you really were. Eventually, the noise stops. The explanations, the justifications, the late-night messages, gone. That's when the silence begins. And it's never loud at first. It creeps in slowly. A missed call that's not returned. A text that stays unread. An attempt at conversation that goes nowhere. At some point, she realized I wasn't just unavailable. I was gone. Not physically. She knew where I lived, where I worked, what coffee shop I went on Sundays. But emotionally, mentally, I had taken every version of myself that once reached for her, and I pulled them all back. She wasn't prepared for that kind of silence. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself. The kind that doesn't punish, it simply doesn't respond. Because here's the truth no one likes to hear. Sometimes the apology comes too late to matter. And when respect is gone, words don't build bridges. They fall flat in the space where trust used to live. I could feel her reaching. Through music she reposted, through photos designed to look effortless, through shared friends who'd casually mention she'd been asking how I was. But I stayed silent. Not because I was holding a grudge, because I had nothing left to say. Silence is often mistaken for revenge. But it's not. It's a declaration of peace. Peace I wasn't willing to give up again for the chance to be understood by someone who only heard me when it was convenient. She had once said she might come back if nothing better worked. And now I think she was testing that theory, realizing that better doesn't always mean more exciting. Sometimes better just means real, consistent, safe, solid. All the things she called boring before they disappeared. And now she stood on the edge of that silence, trying to speak into it. But it didn't answer her. Because it wasn't angry. It was finished. There's a difference between walking away to create space and walking away because you've outgrown the noise. I didn't ghost her. I just returned to the version of me she never tried to meet. The one who doesn't perform, doesn't beg, doesn't chase, just watches and listens until there's nothing left worth hearing. She always believed I'd still be there, even when she left, even when she said maybe, even when she whispered promises with expiration dates. She believed I'd hold the space, keep the light on, wait until she circled back. And for a while, she was right. Until she wasn't. Because silence isn't passive. It builds. It hardens. It grows into a kind of presence that doesn't bend, doesn't explain, doesn't open the door just because someone knocks. By the time she returned, the house was still standing. But the welcome was gone. I saw it the day she finally broke. I was sitting at the cafe where we used to meet. Same corner table, same black coffee. The place hadn't changed. But I had. I no longer scanned the entrance. I no longer waited for her to walk in. But she did. She spotted me, hesitated, then approached like someone unsure if they still had permission to exist in your life. Her voice was quiet, almost apologetic. She asked if she could sit. I looked up, nodded once, then went back to sipping my coffee. She talked about everything and nothing. Her job, her regrets, her failed almost relationships, her confusion about where things went wrong. But that was the moment I saw it. Not guilt, not shame, loss. She wasn't mourning a breakup. She was mourning the death of access. She had finally realized that what she walked away from no longer belonged to her. And that collapse, it wasn't public. No tears, no outburst. Just the quiet slump of someone who knows she stayed gone too long. She whispered, "You really aren't coming back, are you?" I looked at her and said nothing. Because silence was the answer. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need her to hurt. I just needed peace. And peace arrived the day I no longer wanted her to understand me. She left looking for more. Now she stood in front of less. Not because she lost everything, but because what she had was me. And I was gone. Not bitter. Not broken. Just gone in the kind of way that never circles back. She came back one last time. No warning. No text. Just the sound of her voice outside my door. She didn't knock right away. Just stood there. I watched her through the peephole. Still, hesitant. Maybe rehearsing what she'd say if I answered. But I didn't move. She waited. Then came the knock. Soft at first, then firmer. As if she was trying to knock on memory itself. I know I messed up. Her voice was shaky. Real. But not enough. You said I could always come back if I needed to. That version of me did say that. Once. But that version no longer lived here. Now, the space she abandoned was occupied by a man who no longer needed to be needed, who no longer gave chances to people who only returned when their options ran dry. She tried again. Please just talk to me. But the silence between us had matured. It wasn't cold. It was complete. She stayed outside a while longer. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe more. Then, slowly, she turned and walked back down the steps. And I let her go. Not because it was easy, but because it was done. She didn't leave me for someone else. She left because she thought I'd always wait. That I'd be the same man holding the same door, standing in the same place, offering the same love with the same hands. But people grow when no one is watching. And sometimes, that growth becomes a gate that no longer swings open. She once told me she'd come back if nothing better worked. But I was never the backup plan. I was the standard. And by the time she realized it, I wasn't waiting for her to return. I was already gone. Not with someone new, just with someone whole. Me. So when she circled back, whispering my name on a doorstep that used to open for her without hesitation, she finally learned what real consequences sound like. Not yelling, not revenge, just the echo of her own voice. On the other side of a door that doesn't open anymore. Real men don't explode. They exit. Subscribe for more power stories.